Hey, Saikon here. I don't even know where to begin. Actually, that's a lie. I know where to begin. It begins back in 2014. Still in middle school. I was young, so naive, and I was so stupid. Dude, Amazing Spider-Man 2 is trash. So is your taste. Get over it, you little sh. Anyway, I remember a friend of mine telling me about this cool new horror game that came out. He knew I was into Resident Evil, so we went to the store. I saw a little preview trailer, and I liked what I saw, so I bought it.
Thank you.
Boy oh boy, I was not ready for what this game was about to do to me.
I created this world. You cannot keep me here.
Evil Within is a definition of a diamond in the rough. It's a very flawed game. You're not gonna catch me calling it an underrated masterpiece. But it does something so weirdly and uniquely well that it stays with you for a long time as an experience. Shinji Mikami, you know, the man behind Resident Evil 1 and Resident Evil 4. Nothing, just two of the most influential and important titles, not just within survival horror genre, but in video game industry as a whole. There are prayers back in early 2010s when Resident Evil became completely an action game, and decided that it was time for a return to survival horror, to bring back ammo scarcity, tension, and that looming dread to this, at the time, dying genre. And while his means of achieving all that is a bit questionable, it resulted in something that is as fascinating as it is unhinged. In this game, and the sequel, we follow Sebastian Castellanos, who is one of the protagonists of all time. A hard-boiled detective investigating a report of murder at Mental Weekend Hospital, alongside two of his colleagues, Joseph and Caitlin. What starts off as another day on the job suddenly unravels a much more sinister plot and turns into an absolute nightmare. Well, that sounds awesome, right? No, it's not. It's really not. This intro is kinda not good. It's this long and clunky stealth section that comes off as more frustrating than scary. That is a recurring theme, by the way. Put a pin on that. Ow! I think my problem with the beginning is that the village portion that comes after that pretty much does everything better and manages to establish all the mechanics without being such a slog on replays. Speaking of village portion, it teaches you three things about the gameplay or enemy encounters specifically. You're either gonna run, you're gonna get creative, or you're gonna die. And you will die a lot. Many times, in fact. And you quickly realize that this game, compared to, let's say, I don't know, Resident Evil 4 or Dead Space, relies much more on trial and error. You're not gonna do a perfect run of an encounter in your first try. You're gonna fail a lot. And you will learn from all your failures. You have to learn the ins and outs of the environments. You have to learn where the traps are, where the enemy and item placements are, and use all of it effectively to your advantage, while also managing your resources and that god-awful stamina bar that you have. I swear, this dude cannot run for 30 seconds without going. I will give him credit though. They do explain that Sebastian is a smoker in one of the cutscenes, which also explains why he's carrying matches with him all the time. That also plays into gameplay as another mechanic. It can feel a bit clunky, yeah, but when you get the hang of it, it's a very effective crowd control tool. And I think that pretty much sums up the gameplay of this game. Yeah, it's clunky and heck, unpolished even, but if you give it time, and if you try to learn it, and essentially it's good, you'll see how much depth there is to it. The story also falls into the same rule. You have to go out of your way to get into the story. The game expects you to come along on this journey and be thorough. Read all the files, see all the flashbacks, pay attention to the dialogue, the connect all the dots. And once you do, you see that there is more to this than an edgelord with a god complex and a protagonist with a personality drier than my humor in this video.
Leslie! Trying to make me feel sorry for you?
I created this world.
For those who don't know, at the end, it is revealed that all of what you went through, all of this, is happening inside a machine called STEM. It uses the collective consciousness of people connected to it to create this virtual reality. Think metaverse, but not actually cringe. And for all of it to properly work, it needs a core consciousness. And that's where our main villain, RUVIK, comes in. I think what makes RUVIK interesting for me is his portrayal, and why Evil Within 2 villains fell flat for me, and I couldn't take them seriously. He doesn't act very over the top. He's not this cliched lunatic. He's a very troubled individual and very egotistical, and it makes sense for him to act in a very calm and reserved manner. You could argue that he's not a very entertaining villain to watch, but the game more than makes up for it with his backstory.
I know you're in here. I can hear you breathing.
Rich bastards. Think they can buy up all our land.
They need to be shown who really owns these parts.
Hey, I think there's kids in there.
I didn't hear anything. What the?
Somebody, open the door! Reuben! Reuben! You have to climb!
I know, that was a lot, but I had to lay it all in front of you in order to properly explain why Evil Within, despite all of its flaws and being a mess in a lot of areas, manages to create this very sickening and horrifying world, and how its sequel, Evil Within 2, fundamentally misses that point. There are 3 different factors that make Evil Within 2 a completely different experience compared to the first one. First, structure. Second, presentation. And the third one is tone and writing. Now here's a twist. I enjoy playing Evil Within 2. A lot, in fact. The combat and movement is much more polished and fluent, and your arsenal is a lot bigger. And most importantly, they brought back the bottle. And let me tell you, this is how the progression of the first game looks like. Here's the second game. As you can see, it's much less linear. These are your hub areas. Once you enter each one, the game is basically trying to say,
everything the light touches is our kingdom.
at that point, you're free to do whatever you want and explore this place however you want. Hunt down different unlockables, find hidden areas, and do side quests. There is so much optional content in this game, but the thing is, all of this makes it really hard for me to give a shit about the main missions, about the actual story. When you keep making me distracted to do all this extremely fun stuff, you keep taking away from the stakes of the story, from its urgency. My point is, while Evil Within 2 brings a lot of polish, variety, and freedom to the formula, it never reaches the tension and the urgency that the first game had in spades. And that brings me to my next point. Presentation. Evil Within 1 gets a lot of things wrong, no doubt about it. But presentation is not one of them. The game manages to retain that claustrophobic and grungy aesthetic all the way throughout the game. And the atmosphere is so suffocating, but in a good way, so you say suffocate me harder. And on top of that, you have very fascinating, I don't know if this is the right term to use, very fascinating cinematography and direction, random POV shots, camera pans, or these fixed camera angles that they just suddenly use. All of this creates this unique style of presentation that is so trippy and off-kilter, which elevates the dreamlike nature of STEM and really sells you the bizarre nature of this reality. Then we have Evil Within 2. If I were to compare the jump from Evil Within 1 to Evil Within 2 presentation, it's like a Hollywood studio creating a Western adaptation from a niche J-horror movie. It's not to say it's soulless, it's just way more stripped down and simple, like trying to appeal to a more casual audience. It still tries to do strange and trippy set pieces, but it just lacks that flair that the first game had. It also doesn't help that the Union as a setting looks way too clean. I mean, yeah, they explain that in the story that it's meant to be like that. It's like this quaint little town, but that doesn't excuse it looking so plain, okay? Listen, I'm not saying it looks bad. It looks fine. It looks serviceable. But while the first game didn't have the most original look, it still had some visual identity, some vibe, some aesthetic that the second game simply doesn't.
This video has become twice as big as what I usually do. How the fuck am I gonna edit this?
The story is fine. I do think the story of this game achieves what it sets out to do. It tells a very personal and emotional journey for Sebastian. Especially the last chapter, I think it's really good. And the goddamn music, it's so beautiful. I love that track. But originally I wanted to do a 10-minute rant of how melodramatic the story and especially Sebastian feels. They wanted to make him more relatable by having him talk a lot more and be more expressive, which I guess by the end it works. I just don't think he's the same character anymore. In the first game his personality was very plain and simple, sure, but if you read the files you get why he's so distant. He's been hardened by what he went through in the past.
Is this what it was like, Seb? After the accident?
Well, I never put a gun to my head.
No, of course not. Just quietly sank into a bottle.
We can't all be perfect. It never affected my work.
I feel like he just portrayed a much more realistic and grounded way of coping with a trauma compared to this.
Save her? What have you done to her?
So powerful they have to kidnap a washed-up ex-cop to help them.
What does this have to do with my daughter?
But I'm only here to find Lily. Where did my memory dig this up? Elementary school? You wouldn't have told me about Lily if your damn machine... Why couldn't my memory just make regular dose? Sadistic. I don't know. My own ass. And now it's not my own ass.
Now what he is in this game isn't bad. It's effective for what they eventually going for. And I got emotional at the end. I did. His send-off was really well done. I'm just not sure the end justified the means. My last point is the villains.
No one cares.
Nah, I'm kidding. I do enjoy Stefano. I think he has a very entertaining presence. They do a lot of creative stuff with his powers. Father Fyodor, not so much. Every time this man monologues, I just wished instead of focusing on showing what they can do with STEM or what creatures they made or how they made them, they focus on the past. Just like RUVIK. I genuinely felt disturbed and bad for this guy, for what happened to him. They had an entire chapter dedicated to him, for God's sake. His family, his trauma. And despite of how much of a psychopath he is, his reason for creating a STEM was to bring back his own sister. That's a very human and sad reason. Whereas Stefano comes off as a deranged artist with eccentric personality. And he does what he does because he likes to create art. That's it. They could have done so much more to him. Why he became an artist like this? What drives him? Just to create art for the sake of art is just disappointing. And that's my thoughts on this game as a whole. It's good, but it doesn't have something for me to latch onto, except that ending. It doesn't have that spark that the first game had.
At the end of the day, Evil Within 2 is a very enjoyable game. And honestly, I would recommend it over playing the first game because it has a very tighter gameplay and a story that is less cryptic and easier to follow, even though it dropped a lot of things that made the franchise special to begin with. All that being said, Evil Within as a franchise is one hell of a ride, and I recommend you to play both games and decide for yourself. And if you're not getting Evil Within 3, well, I guess this is goodbye. Thanks for watching.